Welcome again. We're joined by Amanda Achtman, who is unpacking her project, the Dying to Meet You project, which discusses euthanasia and suffering and why that's an important discussion to be had. Amanda, again, thanks for joining me today. Just before we went to commercial break, we're talking about that discussion, that as you were blogging about euthanasia for your On Your Dying to Meet You blog for one whole year. I can't believe you did a blog every day for a year, but that's amazing. Congrats. You encountered many people who wanted to share. And sometimes maybe, especially during COVID, we were very isolated and we don't have sometimes that village mentality where we're just next door to someone that we feel we can open up to. Why do people want to share their experiences with death and suffering?
hmm I think these are some of the deepest experiences that we have. If you and your viewers right now think about the experiences of the greatest intimacy and depth of your life, they probably are moments of intimacy that has been forged through times of deep suffering, which become times for great communion. And I love the quotation that compassion is a communion in suffering of those who love. We live our lives, especially younger people, largely online and on social media. And yet, anyone who's been at the bedside of a dying person knows that the impulse there is not to take out your phone. Or at a funeral, it's unless you really need to share it with others who cannot be present, it's not necessarily to live stream it. There's something about these experiences and events that are so poignant and so much more real in a certain sense. And they give us access to the deepest truth of what it is to be a person. And I think that's what draws me to it. For me, in a world that is so much filled with what is fleeting and ephemeral, it is actually a consolation. As a young person, it fills me with uplift and moral courage to contend with the themes that are the greatest significance and that actually forge a kind of intergenerational solidarity, because these are not issues that are demographically siloed, even though it may seem so. We all struggle with questions of, is it good for me to be here? Is it good for me to exist after all? And so I actually think that these issues too, in just discussing them, become the basis for communion that, particularly in a polarized and so much online society, can give us great strength and courage in our time.
Yeah, I think you phrase that so beautifully, and I think that concept or theme of communion, uh, is fascinating. So it leads me sort of to my next question, because you say, why am I here? Why is it good for me to be here? And I think that's a question many towards the end of their life grapple with. And when we have now legalized euthanasia in Canada under the MAID program, many ask, well, why is it good for me to be here? Should I prolong my life? I'm going to die, in 2 months anyways. Why should I continue to be here? How do you respond to that?
hmm Yes. Well, I think first of all, we can probe our own experiences, because there's a lot that we can glean by sort of checking our own experiences and seeing what is meaningful in them. So I think very much to my experience with my grandparents. My grandfather, he and I were very close, and toward the end of his life, my grandmother, his wife, had to go into a care home because she had very severe dementia. And I was a high schooler at the time. I know that my grandfather was going every single day to visit my grandmother. And on the occasions, maybe a weekend here or there, that I would accompany him to this visit, I saw that just minutes after she would forget the visit, that in the course of the discussion, she would forget what had been said just one sentence prior. And that makes an impression on you, especially as a teenager. But what made even more of an impression was my grandfather's fidelity to go and visit her every day, even still. He
Mm.
recognized that this is his wife, who he loves, with whom he shares all of this life and story, and for whom the story was still unfolding before the eyes of his children and grandchildren. And so, even though my grandmother forgot seconds after the thread of the conversation, or even the fact that he had visited, I can attest and I can testify, I do not forget it. And that
Wow.
is immensely powerful. He left a witness to love, and together they needed each other to provide that. It's not something he could have done alone. He needed her to whom he could show this care. And this is what we miss out on in so many ways. The way that my parents invited my grandfather then into our home to live with us throughout my high school and university years is one of the greatest gifts my parents ever gave me. So much so that on their anniversary each year, I often write them a letter or call them and thank them specifically for the gift of bringing my grandfather into our home. Could I have said that as a teenager? Probably not. I couldn't be so sort of moved to express just how poignant this was, but it is a gift that keeps on giving. And anyone who's had the experience of being raised with a sibling with a disability or caring for someone with cancer or all of these eminently human and quite typical experiences is deepened by them. We become more human, we become more ourselves, we become all that we are made to be when we really live this drama, even though it can be full of suffering.
Beautifully said, Amanda. We'll be right back.